God bless the work you're all doing. Greetings. My name is Harry Allen. I'm a writer, a music producer, and some know me as the media assassin for the iconic Public Enemy. By profession, I'm a journalist specializing in popular culture with a focus on hip-hop. In other words, that's how I've spent most of the last 40 years. The last decade, though, has been dedicated to working out some of the experimental implications of hip-hop. In other words, by a certain point in my working life, I became less interested in merely writing about hip-hop and more interested in reimagining what it might do. That's why I applied to the MIT Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Visiting Professors and Scholars program as a visiting scholar. The program, per our website, quote, welcomes outstanding scholars to MIT for visiting appointments every year. Becoming part of the MIT community allows scholars to develop new collaborations, explore cross-disciplinary applications of their work, and deepen their scholarship. It also enriches and expands the reach of the MIT community. MIT benefits immeasurably from the unique perspectives that the scholars bring to their research, teaching, student mentoring, creative pursuits, and life experiences. Excuse me. The program welcomed its first visiting scholar, the late Dr. Henry Ransom Cecil McVeigh, a chemist from Morehouse College in 1991, 35 years ago. Since then, the program has hosted over 160 working scholars from nearly 120 U.S. and foreign institutions, economists to physicists, social justice workers to anthropologists, business management experts to mathematicians, philosophers to historians, electrical engineers to law professors. Knowledge workers from dozens of fields have all been admitted to the MIT MLK Visiting Professor and Scholars program. Today, though, excuse me again, I'm going to tell you about the MIT MLK Visiting Scholar story I know best, my own. It begins about a decade ago at another one of our great galaxy-class institutions, Harvard. In 2017, I was a Nasir Jones Hip Hop Fellow at the Hutchins Center, which is overseen by Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. One evening, we fellows were at dinner when one of Dr. Gates' friends, also dining in the same restaurant, saw him and came over to where we were to say hi. His name was Juno Diaz, MIT Creative Media Studies and Writing Professor, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, MacArthur Genius Award, and the Guggenheim Fellowship. For me, it was like meeting Batman. As a writer and intellectual, Diaz seemed to be living the life I dreamed of. But as we spoke, how kind. Thank you. But as we spoke, I soon learned Diaz not only knew who I was, but was also a fan of me and my work. We exchanged data, and did this come out? No? Okay.
I can still hear you.
You still hear me? Great, thank you. Scary. We exchanged data, and a week or two later, we met for sushi. I'd brought copies of his books for him to sign when, out of nowhere, he raised the subject of me coming to MIT. There was a program funded in the memory of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. MIT faculty, like himself, could make nominations. It came with a significant stipend, and he wanted me to come up with a project we could propose. So I love sushi, but I was really loving this lunch at that moment. It was, as a struggling artist, I was beginning to feel lightheaded that he was actually talking about me coming to this great institution. I had not expected this at all. And Juno was dead serious. He wasn't just pulling my leg. In fact, right there at the table, he made a phone call to ask one of his colleagues, are we still open to make, to recommend someone? Like, he was really serious about this happening. So I told him, first of all, I would absolutely do this. There was nothing that was going to cut off this opportunity for me. And of course, I paid for lunch. Over, over the next several months, goodbye. Over the next several months, we worked on the MLK proposal, finished it, submitted it, and I got turned down, flat. I was pretty disappointed. But then two things kicked in. One, I tend to be pretty philosophical about getting turned down in applications for awards, funding, etc. My attitude is typically, next. In other words, I don't sit around and lick my wounds. Two, I thought, there have got to be lots of other places at MIT that would fund all kinds of proposals. It's an enormous institution. So about a year later, based on the same project I'd taken to Juno Diaz, I applied for an artist's residency at CAST, the Center for Arts, Science, and Technology at MIT, and got in. I got the award. Now, it was a much smaller grant and residency. I'd be there about 10 days. But I completed important work that I'm still developing and expect to continue building at MIT. And maybe I'll talk about that a little later. In the meantime, however, I had another effort, a new one, and one I felt might be a better fit for an MLK application. So the first thing I did was I started working on it early, pulling the application together. I had a friend who knew one of the MIT professors in the area related to my subject. He was in that department, and he introduced me to him. So we scheduled lunch, we met, and nothing. He was very nice and very warm, and he even paid for our not cheap meal. But have you ever gone on a date where, based on the numbers, this should work, but nothing happens, no energy, nothing, you know there's not going to be a second date? That's what this kind of was. By the numbers, it should have worked, but it just didn't. No spark, no energy. He never said, I'm not interested, I won't work with you, or anything. He just smiled, he nodded the entire time, and I think we both knew that this wasn't going anywhere. So we were nearly done, and I was just trying to figure out how to avoid an embarrassed exit, when he said, you should reach out to Brian Wardle, another professor in his department. Now, again, imagine, you go on a date, there's zero chemistry, and your date says, you don't work for me, but I know someone who you might work for. I'm sure you're going to say, oh, yeah, sign me up for that. So I wrote Brian Wardle's name down, much as I've been writing down notes all throughout our lunch, showing I was paying attention, but I wasn't going to call him. And I didn't. 6 weeks later, after doing nothing, 3 weeks before the deadline of a major MIT application, of the kind where one typically starts planning 6 months to a year in advance, I emailed a nanotechnologist I'd never met and who had no commitment to me whatsoever. I told him what I was doing and asked if he would nominate me for this award. Cojones. Here's what should have happened. What should have happened is 2 weeks later, I should have gotten a terse email saying that though my project was interesting, 3 weeks was clearly far too little time to work up a nomination. And given his commitments and duties, perhaps we could speak in the future sometime, maybe this summer or in the fall, and he would have wished me well. Had that happened, you'd be listening to one of our other MLK fellows right now, like Amerchi or Maurice or Patrick. But instead, less than 3 days later, I got an email from Brian apologizing for the slow reply. Amazing to be in touch with you. Your project resonates very much with me, and I am happy to support it if we discuss and it makes sense. 2.5 months later, I was an MLK visiting scholar in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at MIT under Dr. Brian Wardle, full professor of aeronautics and astronautics, jointly appointed in mechanical engineering. As you all well know, you can't overstate the importance of an R1. You can't overstate the importance of the professor with whom you collaborate at an R1 university. Brian utterly made the difference to my existence here in my experience. First, he met with me. Almost as soon as I accepted the award, he immediately started getting me in front of other professors with whom I might speak and collaborate, as we'd described in our proposal documents. He set up weekly meetings. I'd have accepted less regular ones, but this was his preference. He made me a member of Next Lab, his research group. When I stopped going to meetings because grad and postdoc level mechanical engineering papers and reviews were a bit above my pay grade, he didn't accept that or let me just watch via Zoom and gently encouraged me to make use of it. He recruited members of his research team to work with me on my project as a separate team. Rarely have I had so much raw brain power pointed at a single task. Pollock, Sean, Armando, Shweta, Yu Ying, Mariana, Brady, you guys all rock. He wrote a lot. He didn't have me jot letters that he signed, but he wrote those letters. Brian took the initiative. He stayed positive, affirming, and celebratory. Even though he was very busy, when I had his time, I had his time. And I didn't have to hunt for him or wonder when I'd see him next. Perhaps most of all, he embraced my project. And it's here I correct the fact that I've not told you what I'm working on here at MIT. Excuse me. Water never gets old. My project is called the Hip Hop Deep Space Monument, or HHDSM. It's an effort to design, construct, and launch a deep space, deep time capsule to be hoisted far above the Earth by a space-faring vehicle. This capsule will bear a cache of analog sound recordings, 50 to 100 of them. In total, these works will have been deemed through review and discussion with a broad convention of experts to represent hip-hop culture at its highest, most expressive, most definitive, most essential level. These will be the records which most purely embody the spirit of hip-hop, its meaning, its creative peaks. As I like to put it, one might say these are the recordings by which, if we held on to them as the world was lost, we might be able to start the culture over again. The plan is on a date in fall 2029, that year being the 50th anniversary of Rapper's Delight's released, the first rap record and the beginning of hip-hop as a commercial medium. The capsule, bound to a craft, a solar sail named Qumran, will be rocket boosted above the Earth's atmosphere. From there, the vehicle will detach from a rideshare, then via a series of maneuvers over time, months or even years, build speed until it reaches 42.1 kilometers per second, about 94,180 miles per hour, which is solar escape velocity at 1 AU, the distance where Earth resides. From there, the craft should move throughout the spatial void, well, as long as there is one. I have a presentation where I talk about this in more detail than I certainly can today. It's called Behold the Wings of Hip-Hop Space Flight. You can see it by clicking on the bit.ly link, bit.ly, that's bit.ly, HH Spaceflight, that's one word, HH Spaceflight. By its nature, the HHDSM represent hip-hop making a significant claim on space, asking transformative questions about the universe and our role in it, as well as making inquiry into culture and what makes it meaningful. But it is also a vital example of the kind of outcomes that are feasible when our most powerful institutions invest in scholarship that, to quote Steve Jobs, thinks different. I'm not the typical person you see at MIT. I didn't even get through ninth grade algebra, let alone the intense retinue of mathematical sciences in which you must be near expert to succeed here. However, if I dare say so, I bring an experience and a viewpoint you will not see replicated on this 12,000 student campus. It's a vision of the past, present, and future that has been shaped by an unusual life path. I'm the firstborn of Latin American parents who came here in the 1960s. I'm a practicing Seventh-day Adventist, a Millerite fundamentalist, fascinatingly dystopian sect founded in the 19th century. As I said, in college, I became embedded with the people who would become Public Enemy as they were pulling together their musical and political stratagems. I was possibly the first journalist native to hip-hop culture to write about it for national publications. In April '89, I published the first center of the book feature-well essay on hip-hop in Essence magazine. Years later, my wife said that when she read it, she thought, I wish I could meet and talk to the person who wrote this. True story. She says she had never had that reaction to any article before or since. God is good. The thing is, though, all of you and the students you represent are a bundle of unique values on a helicoid, most valuable by your deviation from the norm. If nothing else, the race system itself compels the variance. I really like Gemini, Google's artificial intelligence. I'm working on a podcast idea called Interrogating the AI, which sonifies some of the fascinating, even truly wild conversations and I say we've, like Google the person, we've had. This morning, I asked Gemini a question. How far away in time is the average African American from a person who knew an enslaved person? How far away in time is the average African American from a person who knew an enslaved person? There was a rubber-dubber, 3 seconds it lasted. Then Gemini said, the distance in time is 0 years. Millions of living African Americans today personally knew someone who was enslaved or personally knew someone who lived alongside formerly enslaved people. Now, in your minds right now, some of you, especially some of you who aren't African American, are going, hold it. Doesn't it say at the bottom, Google is AI and can make mistakes? Continuing, because chattel slavery in the United States ended relatively recently with the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865, the generational chain connecting living people to enslaved ancestors is remarkably short. If this is even partially correct, it means that Black people bring to the experience of technology, the sciences, engineering, etc., a differential, a gradient that is not to be ignored, imagined away, resisted, but embraced. First by Black people, then first and a half by other people. This is a fundamental variance and a consequential one in the American experiment. It should not be nullified or imagined so. I see the work I've done here as a visiting scholar, and the work I expect to continue in September as a research affiliate here at MIT, is an argument. They're arguments for the types of possible outcomes when you create a garden of programs all across the educational sphere, which are committed to expanding the definition of research and access, what it looks like, and who it looks like. Being at MIT via the MLK Visiting Professors and Scholars program has literally changed my life and my outlook, and it continues to do so. In January, I expect to bring our first set of voting hip-hop artists here to MIT to question, what does greatness in hip-hop sound like and why? Investing in scholars like me may be a bit dangerous sometimes within the world of ideas. We may not always play or perform to expectations, but neither did anything new. You can write me at hal2029 at mit.edu. That's Hal, like the rampant supercomputer in 2001, A Space Odyssey, my favorite movie of all time. Hal 2029 is the year we launch at mit.edu. If we have time, I'll now take your questions, comments, suggestions, or complaints. Yes, please.
As somebody who loves hip hop, is MF Doom on the album that you're sending?
I can't say. Your question was, is MF Doom on it?
Yes.
I can't say it all because what I expect to engender in the voting process, which has, it's interesting. What I got here, I came here because my thinking was, I know the hip hop part. It's the rocket part. It's the preserve analog signals for a billion years in the spatial void part that I don't get. People barely survive in space. So how to make all that work, I said, that is the part I don't understand. But when Brian, my host, said, how are you going to handle voting? Which is something I get getting asked at MIT a lot. And I was wondering, why do they keep asking me this question? Is it that they're really how do you tell all that rap music apart anyway? Or was it well, no, we're an organization that basically qualifies ideas and things. So what's your process? So I said to Brian, well, what I'm going to do is bring together, a certain number of my friends and colleagues and people, who know about hip hop culture like me. We're just going to create a vote. He said, that sounds like a lot of hand waving. And I was insulted. But what I thought about it, I was like, no, that's actually right. It is a lot of hand waving. It needs a more rigorous kind of apparatus. And so that's something I'm still working out. But the one thing I know is that I am really trying to take my hand off the scales. I really want to leave this question as to the content. I mean, when you think about it, by 2029, hip hop will have been in existence for 50 years. So that means that you put 50 to 100 recordings on this. That's 2 recordings a year. That means every single year you can only pull 2 recordings out of the thousands and thousands that often get, and I'm not talking about albums, I'm saying individual tracks. So what I'm counting on is that people who are passionate, first fans, and then aficionados, experts of various kinds, artists, journalists, will have a lot to say about this and will shape the outcome of what should be in something that represents this vital and important form of human expression. If that answers your question.
So we don't know, but that's really interesting. I just want to follow up.
I figured I would say this. MF Doom is self-evident. So whatever the culture thinks of him, the culture will make a decision. Right, you're talking about the crypto technology, the blockchain. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I don't know a lot about blockchain technology. I'm just fundamentally familiar with the idea that when you put something in or on the blockchain, that the act of submitting it or putting it on it actually kind of locks it or preserves or creates a ledger or a record that cannot be tampered with, thus falsifying any attempts to falsify ownership or the entry. A technology like that could play some role in terms of aspects of what we ultimately do. I can't say directly that it will, but I'm still at the point where I'm still far beyond the point where we really talk about what our methodology is in order to identify and secure the most representative vote, if you will, for what the collective nation of, or I guess planet of hip hop considers important. So I guess what I would say is that such technologies might ultimately be a part of this. It's an interesting idea, but it isn't necessarily fundamental to the way I've imagined the project thus far. And of course, I'm always looking for new ideas and contradictions. But thank you for your question. Yes, please.
Why preserve the recordings in space? Why not figure out, why is sending it to space an important part of the project?
That's a great question. Why sending it to space? One, because few people have done this. There have been only 5 craft. The goal will ultimately be for, as I said, to have the craft leave the solar system. Thus far, only 5 craft have done this, and they've all been sponsored by, well, national interests. So this would be the 6th craft to do so. I took to this idea about 50 years ago when NASA created the Voyager missions, which went to the outer planets and included on the Voyager spacecraft what they called the Golden Record. These were compilations of about 30 Earth recordings, or recordings of music from around the planet, as well as photos, greetings, and other sound and images. This absolutely caught my attention at the time as a young person. And the one thing that's interesting, of course, is that because it was only a nascent form, there was no hip hop on the Golden Record. So in a way, I consider this an updating of the Golden Record, and say that since then, since the Golden Record project, something's been happening on this planet that is innovative, loud, syncopated, polyrhythmic, and profound. And space itself is, especially compared to Earth itself, almost in a way, the ideal preservative medium. It's a vacuum harder than any vacuum we can generate on this planet. There's a lot of rays and particles and things of that nature, but they're very sparse, but they can be really dangerous, so we have to guard against those. It would be against the variances of people, weather, environment, climate, things of that nature. It's the best freezer in the universe, and it's the universe. So I guess I'm thinking that it's a kind of cold storage, almost akin to the seed cold storage in Norway, where they're preserving the Earth's biosphere. This would be a way of preserving its, you might say, music sphere or idea sphere in cold storage. Thank you, great question. Am I fighting lunch at this point? Are there any more questions? I'm bouncing. Praise God. Watch the mic get sliding.
So, like I said, this is an example of bi-directional relationships, and I would encourage you all to talk to Harry during lunch, because if you think about projects like this, in which even working with Harry with your students, and what that could create, I think there's so much innovation in this room. So have lunch set up. If you haven't, so the bathrooms there, right here, to my right. We're going to actually get lunch, and then we're going to come back and have a student talk, and then we're going to do a working workshop.
Oh, sweet.
Please enjoy lunch.
Enjoy lunch.
You still not have lunch, right?
I think so, but I don't know. Hi.
T for 1 second. I had a
Yes,
follow-up question.
absolutely.
Nice to meet you, by the way. I know your hands are filled.
Yeah.
I'll just
Forgive me.
shoulder bump you and say hi.
Hey, thanks.
So my name is Nicholas McKay. I'm a Howard Physics and Data Science double major.
Oh, nuts. Cool.
Yeah, working in photonic integrated circuits for research. But
Dope.
funnily enough, the first thing I ever presented on was research in the mathematical formation of beats. Which
You said the
was-
mathematical. Are you from another place?
Yes, I am from another place.
What place is
I'll
that?
let you guess by the end.
It's
of my,
England or Africa? I
It's-
can't.
My father's British and my mother's from Guyana. I grew up in Guyana. Yeah.
There you go.
That was
South,
really good.
South America.
Yeah, South America.
Excellent.
Not Ghana, not to be confused with Ghana.
Not at all.
So,
yeah.
so
lovely,
my first,
lovely place.
the first thing I ever presented on was the mathematical formation of beats, and that was the first research I ever